The first time I heard the whisper, I was standing in line at the municipal office, holding a folder of papers that felt heavier than they were. The ceiling fan rattled like it had a complaint against the world, and the smell of dust and old files clung to the air. People shifted, sighed, checked their phones. I stared at the crack in the wall that looked like a map of someplace I'd never been and wondered how my life had narrowed into waiting rooms and stamped forms. Samira. It wasn't loud. It didn't echo. It didn't ask for attention. It simply said my name, like it had always known how to say it. I turned, expecting a clerk or someone who recognized me from the neighborhood. No one was looking at me. A man argued quietly at the counter. A woman bounced a baby on her hip. The line inched forward without me. My name had landed in my ear and vanished, leaving behind a small warmth, like a hand that had briefly rested on my shoulder. I shook it off. Stress did strange things. I had been sleeping poorly since my father's death, since the job ended, since the rent crept up like a tide that didn't care how tired I was of swimming. I took a step forward when the line moved, handed over my papers, answered questions, and walked out into the sun feeling thinner than before. The whisper came again that evening as I stood on the balcony of my apartment, watching lights flicker on across the street. The city hummed, a living thing breathing beneath me. I thought of my father's voice, how he used to say my name when he wanted me to listen, really listen, not just hear. But the whisper wasn't his. It was younger somehow, and older too, a sound that didn't belong to any face I could summon. Samira, it said, softer than the wind. What? I asked the empty air, embarrassed even to speak aloud. Nothing answered. I went inside and made tea that tasted like regret. I told myself I was imagining things. Grief rewired the brain. Kindness from strangers sometimes felt like hallucination too, until you realized it had been real all along. Days passed. The whisper didn't come every day. It came when I was tired, or distracted, or certain I was invisible. Once, it came on the bus as I stared out the window at a row of closed shops. Another time, it came in the grocery store when I stood frozen in front of the shelves, calculating whether I could afford fruit and rice in the same week. Each time, it said my name exactly once, and then it was gone. I began to listen for it, against my better judgment. Listening changed things. When you listen, you slow down. You notice the rhythm of footsteps, the small kindnesses people trade without ceremony. A man holding a door. A woman helping an elderly neighbor count change. A boy picking up a fallen scarf and chasing after its owner. I had spent months feeling like kindness was something that happened to other people. Now it seemed threaded through the ordinary, quiet as a whisper. The day I finally followed it, I was on my way to an interview I felt certain I wouldn't get. The building was across town, and I had left early to account for buses that ran on their own logic. Halfway there, my phone buzzed with a message from the landlord, another reminder, another tightening of my chest. I stepped off the bus a stop early, needing air, needing to move without a destination. Samira. The whisper came from behind me, clearer than before. I turned. There was a narrow street I'd never noticed, shaded by old trees whose roots had cracked the pavement into a pattern of survival. At the far end, a small sign hung crookedly, Community Center. I hesitated. I was already late. The interview waited like a judgment. Samira, the whisper said again, not urging, not commanding. Just knowing. I took 3 steps down the street and told myself I could turn back any time. The community center was quieter than I expected, its door propped open with a brick. Inside, a woman with silver hair and kind eyes sat at a folding table covered in pamphlets. She looked up and smiled as if she had been expecting me. "Come in," she said. "You look like you could use a chair." I began, then stopped. My voice sounded thin. "I have an interview." She nodded. Chairs don't keep you long. They just let you rest. I sat. The chair held me without complaint. On the walls were children's drawings, crooked houses and suns with too many rays. A kettle whistled somewhere. People moved in the background, stacking boxes, folding clothes, laughing softly. What is this place? I asked. A lot of things, she said. Mostly a place to land. She poured me tea without asking how I took it and slid the cup across the table. It tasted like something I'd forgotten. I realized I was crying only when a tear splashed into the saucer. I'm sorry, I said, mortified. Don't be, she replied. Tears are honest. I told her more than I meant to. About my father. About the job. About the way my name felt like it was dissolving in the mouths of offices and forms. She listened without interrupting, her attention steady and warm. When I finished, she reached under the table and handed me a tissue. You know, she said, we're short a pair of hands today. No commitment. Just help us pack some food boxes. It might be a good way to shake the nerves before your interview. I'm already late, I said. She smiled. Then be late kindly. I stayed 15 minutes. Or maybe 30. Time loosened its grip. I packed rice and lentils into boxes, labeled dates, tied string. A young man with paint on his jeans told me a joke that made me snort laugh. A woman thanked me like I had given her a gift. When I finally left, my chest felt lighter, as if something had shifted its weight. I missed the interview. I sat on the bus afterward, bracing for the familiar spiral. But it didn't come. Instead, I felt held. Not by certainty, not by guarantees. By the simple fact that I had been useful to someone for half an hour. That my name had been spoken kindly. The whisper didn't come for a while after that. I went back to the community center the next week, then the next. I helped where I could. I learned names. I learned stories. I learned that kindness didn't always announce itself, sometimes it worked quietly, like roots cracking pavement. One afternoon, as I folded donated sweaters, a small girl tugged at my sleeve. What's your name? She asked. Samira, I said. She smiled as if she had found something she'd been looking for. That's a good name. It felt like a blessing. Months later, I found work. Not the kind I had planned for, but the kind that paid and left me enough energy to return to the center in the evenings. The whisper returned less often, as if its work was mostly done. When it did come, it felt less like a mystery and more like a reminder. On the anniversary of my father's death, I sat on the balcony again, watching the city breathe. The night was gentle. I closed my eyes. Samira, the whisper said, tender as ever. Yes, I answered, not to the air, not to the past, but to myself. I understood then. The whisper wasn't a ghost or a miracle. It was the part of kindness that knows you before you know yourself, that speaks your name when the world forgets to. It was the echo of every gentle hand, every listening ear, every place that lets you rest. I stood, went inside, and wrote my name on a piece of paper, slow and careful. I taped it to the fridge where I'd see it every morning. It looked like a promise. And in the quiet that followed, I didn't need the whisper anymore. I carried it with me, saying my name in a voice that sounded like hope.